Still, mics are up. Listening right now to Smooth 98.1 FM. And of course, we've come to the segment where we talk about the detailed analysis of newspaper stories inside of Freshly Pressed 981. And that same hashtag is operative on Twitter on our handle at Smooth 981 FM. Send your messages with that hashtag Freshly Pressed 981. Also on YouTube, where we're streaming live, Lagos, you get to see the wonderful analyst in the studio, plus the beautiful face of Folu.
Hey, good morning, Lagos.
Yeah.
And our fantastic analysts are Devoe Okorie. He is in the studio this morning. Good morning, Devoe. How you doing?
Good morning, Lagos.
Yeah, cool.
Cool political knowledge.
I missed that.
Look at that. We've also had Gbolahan in the studio, aka Mr. G Quest. G Mac, how you doing? Good morning.
Very well, Tolu. Good, Folu. Good
Ah,
morning.
It's okay.
That's it.
See, Ikemesit
I knew he was
like
gonna jump on
somebody's
that.
going to be in trouble.
He messed up.
And Ikemesit Effiong is also in the studio. Good morning, Ikemesit.
Good morning, Lagos. Morning, Folu.
Excellent. Great to
Otolu.
have you all here. I'll beat you. But without further ado, we're jumping to the first.
Talks about INEC registration actually comes as cherry news because I assume that a lot of people still have not registered in the continuous voters registration exercise that has been extended apparently by INEC till the 31st of August 2018. Devoe, your thoughts?
Yes, this is quite an interesting story because it's giving us an idea of the political landscape. We had the demerits are looming. One, is this a test of ideology? Is it that we just can't think alike, or are we so divided that we have 91 parties for our population? Secondly, what's the authenticity behind these parties? We do know that many of the major parties do sponsor political parties just to create some kind of division, or so that you're not able to meet up your numbers, because the winning game in politics is all about the numbers. And at the end of the day, you start seeing this charade of, okay, I'm stepping down for this person, or what we refer to as constituency sales.
Exactly, Mike. That's where my next question was going to come from, because now I'm curious to find out really what's the major motivation behind forming new political parties and why people get on it.
Right.
Because it would have been a situation where people vie for political office or positions really just to pass on an agenda, or some positivity into making sure that certain offices
Right.
get the job done. But now it seems as if, like you said, they are just stepping in for their personal gains.
Well, and as you know, it is part of the political game. You do need numbers. So sometimes for numbers to work, those constituencies are sold, because sometimes, in most cases, we associate ourselves around individuals. So if a certain individual who is influential says this is where we're going, many of his followers or their followers will take to them. Now, to make it work, we know that there are two major parties, right? We're going to have to need a third alternative that has the numbers to topple it, just like the APC was able to bring about a regime change in 2015 with the then administration that had lasted for about 16 years. Now, we don't know whether CUPP, which is the current arrangement for parties to come together, will work under these terms. Two, you need a grassroots strategy. At the end of the day, with 91 parties, what is the real strength of the grassroots party? If you cannot aggregate those numbers to at least give you an assured 2/3 percentage up front in the election, you're really going nowhere. Secondly, we know that it may not just be today that some of these parties have the vision to take over. Maybe some of them are looking at local government winning. Some are looking at taking over the states, while those who have some strength will look at the federal side. But it's a good move. We're just waiting to see whether the synergy will work at the end of the day.
Yeah.
The bed of strange fellows sometimes does work. We know APC is not in government.
Interesting.
So here's what I gathered from what you said. One, you can choose more than just APC or PDP. So please note that. The other thing is go and get your PVC. Please register to vote. The deadline has been extended, but please register to vote.
Yeah, so 91 parties to choose from. All right, Premium Times has this one next. Civic groups, media advocates, Nigerians condemn arrest of Premium Times journalist. He goes by the name, is a local and international media rights advocates actually putting their voice on this. His name is Samuel Ogundipe. He was arrested, he's a security sector reporter. He was arrested and detained by the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS. But then he was not detained alone. There are some other journalists that were arrested as well. Editor-in-Chief Musikulu Mujid, who's an educational correspondent as well, Azizat Adenuga. I said these two were detained but then released, but they still held on to Samuel Ogunnipe and also tried to coerce him to release his source for one story that he published on the paper. Ikemesit, looking at the story, it makes me shudder. The outright violation of the Freedom of Information Act, apparently as it seems, of 2011, by trying to coerce a journalist to reveal his source. I don't get how brazen have the force become, and shouldn't there be checks, to this kind of act?
I mean, it's really tragic, really, right? Because we think that well into the 17th year of our democratic experiment in this country, there are some good habits that we should have cultivated by now. But clearly, it would seem that, and harping on to the larger points that Devoe made in the earlier reports, it would seem that this is a potential indication, right? This is yet one more indicator, I should say, of just how polarized and really toxic the current political environment is. I mean, it's one of the cardinal rules, right, of journalism. Sources are secret, right, as it were. If sources were not secret, lots of people who have access to the information and understanding necessary for the public to make appropriate and intelligent political decisions, or to make sense of what our political leaders are doing, we will not have access to those things because people would not be comfortable talking to the journalists in whom we have invested the responsibility to keep us informed about what's going on in the country. I mean, Nigeria is currently ranked 109 out of 180 countries on the Reporters Without Borders World Press Freedom Index. It's the part of the ranking that is called the bad or the red zone. And here's what the Reporters Without Borders said just in May this year. In Nigeria, I'm quoting verbatim, it is nearly impossible to cover stories involving politics, terrorism, or financial embezzlement. Journalists are often threatened, subjected to physical violence, or denied access to information by government officials, police, and sometimes the public itself. It's an operating environment for those of us in the media, or those of us in whom the dissemination of publicly available information is sacrosanct, right? Find that is very unfriendly, which is why sometimes, especially with the recent chapter of fake news, and when people sometimes online rail into the media for their coverage and their reportage, it's good for us to acquire some perspective with respect to how easy it is for journalists to operate and what we can do, as ordinary citizens to ensure that we put in the right people who are able to respect these things. If people in power are not checked in any way, means, or possible, and one of the key mechanisms of checking power is transparency, right? How can we comfortably say we're a democracy?
And how well do these leaders or lawmakers really understand the law and the implementation of it? Because this is there's a journalism confidentiality privilege that's attached to this.
Yeah, it's in our laws. It's in our laws, the laws that some lawmakers passed, and lots of people online and offline had emphasized and made the points,
but
right?
let's play devil's advocate here, yes. But in the interest of public safety, it's one thing to protect a source, it's another thing to protect a person or individuals that legitimate security agencies may feel are a threat to public safety and security. And that tends to be the guise, at least, under which security agencies insist on getting information about people's sources. And that is not... it is not strange in the world. It is not unheard of that you will have security agencies who will insist on getting information about your source if they genuinely feel that there might be a concern there. So is the issue now with the legitimacy of the concern of the security agency?
Well, now, so you rightly said in some situations, right,
Yes.
that would be genuine and that would be relevant.
Yes.
This does not look like this is one of those
It doesn't
situations.
seem on the surface
It doesn't
of
seem
it.
on the surface. So SARS was essentially asking for Mr. Ogunnipe to disclose the source of information over a story published by Premium Times on a correspondence between the Inspector General of Police and the Vice President. I'm just thinking about what level, right, of correspondence between the IGP, who let's remember has been one of the least transparent figures, right, under this administration,
But again,
right, and the vice president. And really, if you look at the story, the recent story that Samuel Gunipe published, it didn't seem, at least to my mind, to raise any core national security implications.
I mean, again, though, if somebody is leaking, and it is a leak, if somebody is
Of
leaking
course.
information that should be more or less confidential, or communication that should be confidential between a top-level security officer and is it not the vice president? I mean, that is a matter of some concern.
It is a matter of some concern, but you know what the courts in many parts of the world, including Nigeria, have said, right? If it is in the overriding public interest for a particular information
To be
to be released, then even if it is leaked, it's fair game. It's allowed.
Understood. I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah,
So that it's not,
Sure.
people don't just assume there's no grounds or basis for this.
Yeah.
There is a basis for that.
And now the basis of certain authorities, or really security operatives or authorities within their jurisdiction to carry out certain actions will be questioned in the next story. Vanguard has this one. Osinbajo directs IGP to investigate human rights violation by SARS. And this is in reaction to the worry that has been raised by the plethora of comments and complaints over human rights abuses by the Special Anti-Robbery Squad of the Nigerian Police, otherwise called SAS. The acting president, Yemi Osinbajo, has directed the Inspector General of Police, Ibrahim Idris, to commence investigations in the allegations and thereafter overhaul the management and activities of SARS and ensure that the unit that emerges from this process will be intelligence driven and restricted to the prevention and detection of armed robbery and kidnapping and nothing else. Gbolahan, your thoughts?
Yes, I think we have to give credit to the acting vice president, Professor Yemi Osinbajo.
Acting
president.
Oh, sorry,
Acting
acting
president,
president.
yes.
I stand corrected.
Yes.
For this move, it's a welcome move. You know, there's been a lot of clamor that has been going on for several months now, since about middle of last year, if not late last year, about the incidences and the human rights violation that has been going on, that has been perpetrated by the Special Anti-Robbery Unit of the police, which is SARS. And there's been a lot of clamor for this for so long. And we have to give credit to most of the social media conveners who have actually campaigned on this situation currently going on in with SARS at the moment. We have to give a lot of credit to them. But what I would actually like to point out is who exactly is meant to be carrying out this investigation, one, and who also will actually be doing the overhauling as well. In my own view, I'd have actually expected that it shouldn't actually be the IG of police that should be carrying out the investigation. The reason why I say so is that when you're talking about reforming an institution, you shouldn't actually be a judge, or you shouldn't actually be one that should actually reform an institution that you are a part of.
So you're
Like being a judge
suggesting...
in your case.
Yes,
You're
like being a
suggesting
judge in
an
your own
independent body
case. It should
stepping
be
in?
an independent body. And we do have independent bodies. We have the Ministry of Police. We also have the Police Service Commission as well, who are a little bit more superior than the police force themselves. So, you know, when we're talking about actually restructuring, it's questionable to expect that we'll get a lot of reform taking place by the IG of police, especially when you look at the previous article that was actually just reviewed by Ikemesit as well, to where it's being questioned, where the police is actually questioning the source of the reporter who's actually reported that incident.
But give me a second. Let's cast our minds back. I mean, even in recent times, we know that in recent reports have emerged, you've shown that certain operatives of SARS, or people actually purporting to be members of SARS, are impersonators coming into this, act of being SARS members, wearing a mufti, dressed in mufti and going to arrest people. In this call, the acting president is not only asking them to reform, but make sure in the reformative process, identify the unique members of SARS and, make sure each one has a tag. I mean, that's really is something to look at, because if you ask an IG to step aside and ask an independent body, there's a widespread apathy to SARS already. But the IG, I would think, is in a better position to identify the members of his force that are members of SARS, legitimate members of SARS, and those who are not, don't you think?
When we're talking about the reform as well, we're not exactly saying that the IG should step aside, but he should actually conduct this overhauling in conjunction with other government agencies as well, so are not just done by the IG or police.
Okay.
I'd also like to take our mind back, or cast our mind back to last year as well too.
Yeah.
That when we're looking at it, this IG has actually said the same thing
Yeah.
about reforming, and we didn't really see much about it.
Indeed, a lot of
Alright.
them have said that, but we have to move on for time reasons.
Thank you very much. Punch newspaper is next. Supplementary budget. Saraki, Dogara explain delay. So the Senate President Bukola Saraki in this report and the Speaker of the House of Representatives Yakubu Dogara on Tuesday gave reasons why the National Assembly could not reconvene. Also in this story, Devoe, there's also reports, allegations from the APC alleging that the PDP is colluding with the Senate President Bukola Saraki to attack some of its members. What's your take
Well,
on this?
simple and short, they've said the Joint House Committees on Appropriations need to meet with the INEC officials and present a report, which the House will sit on. Simply said. Now, that meeting will take place today. We're waiting for the outcome. Well, there are undercurrents, PDP saying, or APC saying that the police need to monitor Saraki, that there's a conspiracy of thug attacks on the APC members, that his act of refusing to reconvene is treasonable, PDP saying it's childish, and that the NAS will not, that's the National Assembly, will not succumb to blackmail. Well, the fallout of this is this. Governance is now being bounced, trumped on the altar of politics or politicking. Now, what I foresee is a logistic challenge come the election. It is very likely because the more they delay this, the harder it becomes for INEC to fully, effectively deploy the elections. Thirdly, it's no gainsaying that there's a constitutional crisis coming if INEC is not able to deliver elections as and when due. As you know, there are dates lined up for this which cannot be changed. And when they do have to be changed, it means we're going to have to address the position in the constitutions. Unfortunately, there's what they call cause and effect. We shouldn't act like ostriches and start a new media war when time comes that, oh, how come we're not ready? This is the making of a big disaster.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's keep it moving on to our next story. Electricity workers are threatening to shut down power nationwide. They say it's because the boss of the transmission company of Nigeria is sort of disregarding labor laws and carrying on with promotions as he feels. Your thoughts, Gbolahan?
Yes, well, this is the electricity workers we're talking about is the transmission company of Nigeria, which we know is one of those companies that has been unbundled from the old
NEPA.
PHCN or so. But you know, when we're talking about transmission, they are almost a monopoly in this case now because they do the transmission of the entire power line of the electricity in the country. So what has actually happened now is that we've had the Senior Staff Association of Electricity and Allied Companies who have gone on strike, complaining that there's been some violations by the MD of the company, and there's some allegations that he has illegally promoted certain members of staff or done some promotions without actually getting the other management team involved. So he single-handedly picked or cherry-picked certain members of staff and promoted them. There's also further allegation as well too that there's some allegation of tax default as well that has been carried out in the company as well too, and that FIRS has actually shut down the premises. There's further allegation as well too that there is misappropriation of funds. So there's so many allegations flying left, right, and center. Yeah, quite a lot of problem. But the situation now is that we've only heard one side of the story because we haven't actually heard the other side of the story from the MD himself.
Yes, yes. Well, we will definitely wait on that and see if he'll give us some news or information. But let's roll on to the next story. From the Guardian newspaper, reviewed NYSC allowance will come with the new minimum wage, the DG assures, and he assured youth corps members that, listen, it will take effect shortly, and he was addressing Battery corps members, but did also go on to talk about their role in the upcoming election, saying, listen, just conduct yourselves with dignity or things to that nature. Very interesting stuff to do, especially considering that people tend to fear for the safety of corps members when elections roll around. What are your thoughts?
Right. Whenever you tell anyone in this world that their future increase and benefit is tied to the increase of the Nigerian minimum wage, you have thrown them on a long thing, first of all. Secondly, the DG, through the Director of General Duties, was speaking to the latest batch in Bauchi about how the United Nations was grateful to their service. Come on. What's their own with the United Nations? Is the country not grateful?
You have to go global.
You know? So, secondly, I mean, it's a feel-good story. And then secondly, he told them that, okay, that with the increase, that they will engage them again come elections. Well, the truth is, all corporates know that the election time is, if you are fortunate to be a corporate during elections. The Lord is your strength and your muscle. You have been blessed. So I think the corporates are all smiling, even though the DG said they should be of best behavior, not to be biased to show any.
But they make these promises every year
Yes,
now.
not
As
to
in,
make this. So, only corporates can tell you why the election time works so well for them. For those who have
Extra.
gone on trips,
Go and
built
ask.
houses, completed their homes in their villages, I wish I was a corporate even now.
Wow. Well,
No
on that
doubt.
note, just before we roll on to the next story, very quickly, a few messages from Twitter. Flexmaster Nate says, we need a third alternative care, talking about parties.
Yeah.
He says, we've got 89 other parties besides the APC and PDP. The real issues are the huge amount of funds that you need to make any impact in Nigerian politics, fragile party coalitions due to lack of trust and close-minded or vote-selling electorate. Very, very major issues there. We've also got this one in from Gbolahan Adenuga, who says, Gbolahan, the IGP should just step aside. He's incompetent and it's only good for bullying people. Very harsh words there. While Anua Mano, roasted corn addict, says, you can't ask an IG who's ordered the arrest of a journalist to reform the police. It's a no-brainer. You can't be a judge in your own case. It is the IG who should be reformed/removed. But we move on. From the Punch newspaper, next, Nigeria borrows 2.75 trillion naira in 1 year. Looks like quite alarming figures there, but we are seeing comments coming in from the federal government explaining why it seems to be such a harsh rise, crediting it to not just the loss of income during the crude oil issue years, but also pointing out that it has resulted in reduced interest rates. I do know that on Business Express a couple of days ago, we were talking about how the government has paid back quite a lot, actually, recently. But over to you.
810 million. Besides, is it 6.75 billion or trillion?
Trillion.
Okay, yeah,
Trillion.
because
Yeah.
it
With
is
a
trap.
trap.
With a
Trap.
With a trap.
Okay. Sorry, Lagos, we're not conjugating this morning. Yeah. So so it's interesting, really. So the primary reason why our debt load has increased significantly, and indeed the funny thing is, if you actually look at the figures, right, over the currency of this administration, it's been like what? There's been a 486% rise in our foreign commercial debt stock. Just since Buhari came into power, and the Punch ran the numbers, and it came out on Monday. So I saw the story, and it was quite interesting. But the really interesting about this is how the Director General of the DMO tried to explain it away, and she essentially said the government didn't borrow as much. So if the government didn't borrow so much in the last 3 years, we wouldn't have been able to function as a government. Well, the question then becomes, what do we have to show for all of this debt that we've been borrowing? All over this while we've primarily borrowed to maintain our living patterns, our current spending patterns, which is we've been spending a lot more on recurrence than capital. Obviously, the capital component of the budget has inched up somewhat over the last 3 budgets. But the point is, we still spend a significant proportion of the money that we earn, and now, as we found out, we borrow, right, to pay salaries, for a bloated civil service.
In response to the question,
Yeah.
some people could say, one, it was done to prevent a total breakdown of law and order in this country, because we seem to be heading that way at one point, with no money, militant attacks, the crude oil money coming in, but the other being that it's a more long-term approach.
Yeah. So the
refinancing.
Yeah, I know. So
Refinancing.
okay, so the counterpoint to that is, I personally don't have a problem with government with the federal government borrowing. All governments around the world borrow. All governments spend more than they earn.
Yes.
In the end, it's about how whatever gets into your coffers is managed
So
and is being
Which
utilized.
government do you think is going to cut down our biggest problem, which is recurrent expenditure and the bloat of government?
If you ask me, I don't think the next 2 administrations, even this one, and I don't think the next 2 administrations will, because it will be tough. It will require you to do a couple of things. It will require you to drastically shrink the size of government, which will be a very, very unpopular thing in Nigeria.
Strike.
Yeah, I know we say it on social media, like, we need to do this thing. When we actually do it, some of us, our parents will lose their jobs, our uncles will lose their jobs, and no.
Realistic
No.
perception.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Very quickly, our next story now. Let's talk about airlines. Ethiopian Airlines not favored to manage Nigeria Air, says the federal government. Now, they're faulting a claim by Ethiopian Airlines chief executive Kayode that the airline is favored to establish and manage the new Nigeria Air. This was a statement that was made recently in Addis Ababa. But of course, the Minister of State for Aviation, Senator Hadi Sirika, says even if Ethiopian Airlines had tendered an offer to be a partner, of which they're considering several, it is preposterous and misleading for their boss to make such a statement.
Yes, that's correct. Warning to Ethiopian Airlines,
Stop
do not
shouting.
jump the gun and be patient and wait for the reviews and wait for all the, because right now what is currently going on is that, of course, there's a lot of right now at the moment there's been a lot of people. Airlines have actually submitted interest with the federal government as well to be partners in this, and the decision is not being made yet, and the process is actually still ongoing. According to the Minister of State for Aviation, is currently actually saying that right now at the moment there's a lot more that needs to go into the thought process of the national carrier. We're talking privatization of the airport, concessioning of the airport, cargo terminals, establishment of an aviation leasing company as well. So there's a lot that goes into having this national carrier at the moment now. So it's still being discussed, and the final outcome of this decision is not actually been made yet. But there's an interesting part to this topic, to this article, which we have Captain Fola Akinkuto, who is the managing director of the Nigerian Airspace Management Agency, who is also one of the members of the National Carrier Committee. He's actually been granted an interview, and on one of the interviews he's actually said that there's no way we could have a private airline without government involvement. And the reason for this is that government has a lot more clout, has a lot more financial resources to be able to put together a national carrier rather than more money than the private sector. So we can already see the direction of the government here, that there's going to be a lot of government involvement in this. I totally disagree with this because there's so many private airlines that we have around the world. But I would like to end there.
5%.
Thank you very much for that fantastic ending. See what I did there. Anyways, final story from the Guardian newspaper. We literally have a minute to talk about it. Global survey ranks Lagos the third least livable city. Now we do know the number one. I think a lot of people were paying attention. That their embassy might be inundated with requests shortly. But over to you, Ikemesit, your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so we're ranked 138 out of 148. The criteria that the Economist Intelligence Unit and the World Bank used included such things as political and social stability, education, culture, environment. Our highest score was in culture and environment, 53.5%, which if you live in Lagos makes sense. I mean, I don't need to explain that. Followed by infrastructure, but our lowest ranking was in education, 33.3%. So we're only ranked higher than two cities, Dakar, Senegal, which is the capital of a country that is not exactly known for all things good and fluffy, and Damascus, Syria, which has been the epicenter of one of the world's bloodiest wars. And Damascus, Syria, yeah. So those are the only two countries that we trumped up. Just to underscore
so nobody else in Nigeria made it on Civic. That's what I said.
Please, we're ranking the top cities. All the other cities, they can't. I'm saying this because I'm in Lagos. I would say this was outside Lagos, right? But just to underscore the lucidity and the sheer insanity sometimes of living in Lagos. On my way to the studio today, right, as I was turning into the street just before you turn in to the Smooth FM compound, a guy was walking past another pedestrian who was just minding his own business, and he just punched the guy. And as the other guy who was punched wanted to respond to him, the other one simply just told him in Yoruba, "You really want to try yourself?" Just like that. And the other guy just had to keep moving. And I who observed it, I kept moving on like nothing happened.
And I'm sure you're under stress by seeing that. Just seeing that. On YouTube,
Welcome to life in
Judith
Lagos.
Judith sent this message. She said, the entire police force should be overhauled. The medical and mental health examination should be extended to all policemen and not just SARS operatives. Unfortunately, that's the much we can take. We'll read most of your comments back behind the camera. Lagos, thanks for watching on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/smooth91FM Lagos to catch all the episodes you missed. It's 8 o'clock. Time for us to switch lanes. At 8:50, we'll talk sports inside of the locker room. Good morning.
Quick access to notes from Page 5 Actions.
This spent over half our show discussing 3 stories.
How many?
3 stories.
That's not
Who's that?
I'm looking
Name
at
calling.
all.
I was cautious of
To be
time.
fair, I can't blame Gbolahan because by the time he got to Gbolahan,
It was time, exactly. So I was always the one that was actually bearing the front.
And Ikemesit. I'm just looking at Valentine. I said, eh?
I just came back in my
You know,
mind.
it's just
to be fair, we're talking about INEC and SARS. I mean,
I get it, but I was like, it was 7:46, 7:47 by story 3.
But we started at 7:31 though, so we were just a minute behind
Yeah,
time
but
or so.
7:47 is that's 10 minutes in the end. There's story 3.
Food for thought.
You don't see the way I go through this thing.
Yeah, food for thought. Devoe, Gbolahan, Folu, and Val. Please, why is the special anti-robbery squad of the police arresting journalists?
Yeah, that doesn't
didn't
make
make
any
sense.
sense. That is what we should have been questioning. Why that agency?
Why
Do they have
that
jurisdiction
particular
over
unit
Do you
of the
understand?
police?
Why that agency?
It's unfortunate.
But,
Why did DSF mask themselves?
Why?
National
See,
Service?
it's these tiny things
Yes.
that make us get around
well,
to
DSS, I can even
But the instruction
kind of
was given by the
understand mass
IG,
DSS, right?
according
If
to
you're
the article,
state
though.
secure, if you're
So it could
the
have been
state
anybody.
security
It could-
of the
the
state,
same IGP
I
that he
get
wants
it.
to lead
It
police.
could have been anyone.
Identifying-
The one that-
Your role is not to be identified. You're not a police officer, right? If you're a DSS and you're masked, I understand in a scary way, but I understand why you would be a masked DSS
But if you're a
operator,
police officer, you should be
but not
clearly
a
marked
police
as
officer.
such.
Oh yeah, of course.
No,
Clearly
Can
marked
I
as
ask
such.
a question? People missed something.
Yes.
The way the arrest was
Conduct a hair.
it was done Gestapo style.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Thank you. See, I
So
didn't.
basically,
Those were the
he
kind
must
of things I
have been
wanted to
able
know.
get the guy.
The first calls Portray gets claims that there was a fraud case in which her name was involved and that she showed. So Premium Times actually showed me that letter. It was stamped and everything. They claimed that they had received it. So they told her, since some people are committing fraud with your name, go and answer the police.
Oh wow.
So she went.
And they detained.
She went with Musilio, that's the editor.
That's the editor. That was.
Got there, they slapped him a bit, then they detained her and gave her a number to call. That this is the person that we want.
Ah.
So you get call this person, that this is the person that is doing the fraud. It turned out to be Samuel's number. So when she told him what they claimed, he said, of course he will come. He came.
Is that why they froze his account?
So he knew then that they were. He just went.
Yeah.
Under that
That was
guy.
under that
That was
pretext.
the guys that
That's the guys.
But
But
you
to
see,
freeze people's accounts as
you
well,
need
don't you
a
need a
court
court order?
You need a
Yes,
court order,
you do.
exactly.
so
Can't
You
just
need
do
a
that,
court
sir.
So those, you see, those are the kind of things that would have been nice to have pointed
right?
out.
Because
Sorry?
it's in the story.
It's in the story. Yeah.
Yeah, because
I know
if the
because I was waiting for them to publish that yesterday.
Yeah, they did. They
Oh,
did.
okay.
But you know, this government is
But the
of no
bank,
consequence.
yeah, the banks are in a quandary because
Yeah,
if any security agency shows up and says do this,
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
you will do it. If you take a really brave bank
Well-
manager to say go get a court order,
Yeah,
when they will not woes you,
yeah.
the woes will freeze the account.
I mean, the only thing that you can actually do, but you see, that's the great thing about a bank, right? Because there's so many processes in a bank to
Yeah.
get things done.
Yeah.
You can actually stop
Stop.
the police.
Yeah,
you
of
can.
course
You can
Of course.
completely do
If
it.
it really-
If
You
you are
can- you cannot
determined
just
to
print
do
it, you can
not be
actually-
like, I don't have.
I'm
access,
waiting
you have to do
for
this, but
authorization
waiting.
from
You do
yeah,
it.
we have to
from
send
the
it to
GM,
headquarters.
whatever.
You
Yeah,
can
yeah,
do
yeah.
network,
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
do it. That this is what we've been instructed. Come on,
Yeah.
you're a whole bank. You can do that.
Yeah.
You can.
Sorry, can I just say that since we're in the holiday season,
Are we in holiday season? Okay,
Oh,
well, the people